Hello and welcome to Board Now's Cult Rants, and on this video I return to Jessica Jones Season 3, and I'll be doing a double review today because basically I thought these two episodes sort of work quite nicely together. So I will be reviewing episode 6, which is called AKA Sorry Face, and then episode 7, which has the intriguing title The Double Half Wappinger, or AKA The Double Half Wappinger. So I'll obviously explain where that title comes from when I get to it. But yeah, it's been a while since I've done these, so apologies for that, but I'm going to keep going with them till I finish. Season going quite well up to this point. So yeah, episode 6. So where we left off in the previous episode was then Gregory had kidnapped Derek at the end of the episode, and they actually made it look a bit like he actually killed him, but we find out in this episode that he's kidnapped him and is, sort of using him as bait to try and draw Jessica and the vigilante out. The vigilante, as we know, is Trish. And also he's torturing him and kind of putting this guilt trip on him and trying to get information out of him as well. So it's a whole thing. And we see, again, this sort of divide between Jessica and Trish and their methods. So Jessica is trying to get like a warrant to search Schlesinger's apartment, and obviously her contact Costa in the police force is trying to make this happen, because he sort of says at this stage and not sure he's got a legal precedent to push forward with, exploring Schlesinger, but he's trying to get a warrant anyway for his apartment. And again, Jessica and Trish are having this debate where Jessica, this new sort of character sort of thing for her is that she wants to do things by the book. She wants to get the warrant and do things that way because she's worried then, if they don't do that and they just go in all gung-ho, that then, Schlesinger might escape on a legality sort of thing. So there's still that tension with her and Trish. Trish obviously more aggressive in her methods now, wants to resort to violence and just bypassing the law sort of thing. So there's that sort of tension between those two characters still. So, Gregory, throughout the episode, we see him torturing Eric. We see he calls Jessica at one point and makes a threat and sort of says, if you don't give me the identity of the vigilante, I'm going to kill Eric. And the torture scenes are really well done. They're really intense and they really had me squirming sort of thing. I think the actor playing Schlesinger is really, really good at playing this just unhinged character, but also this sort of everyday guy who's just convinced that he's in the right sort of thing. And he sort of opens up to Eric about his past, about the fact that he had a brother. The brother was killed, but how basically the brother was kind of the favourite in the family from the father's point of view, and how he kept screwing up basically but never seemed to learn from his errors. And so that becomes a thing with Gregory, how he's kind of painting it as, he had it coming sort of thing because he just had all these chances and just kept blowing all of them. So maybe sort of hinting a little bit that Schlesinger might have killed his brother. And so he's kind of putting this sort of guilt trip on Eric as well. He's sort of saying, you're the same really. You're this crook, this sort of trickster who just manipulates the system and does it time again, never learns. So yeah, he's kind of again painting himself as this innocent morality sort of crusader in a way that he tries to paint it as he does it, to punish these people, and he's doing it all in good faith and that sort of stuff. So really effective scenes with Schlesinger and Eric. And what I like about the Jessica and the Trish side of things is then I think it returns to the basics of the investigation and about Jessica using her sort of street smarts and sleuth skills to try and piece together clues to basically try and find Schlesinger and find the location he's holding Eric in. And there's this really funny scene because they sort of hear about this chef who Gregory had a bit of a thing with, but he was kind of buttering him up, to target him as a victim. But he finds out then Schlesinger went to his cookery class, and that Gregory suggested, go into like a location for a day, and it was this, out of bounds kitchen that wasn't in use. And so Jess hears this repulsive story basically about how he did all these things with like cutlery and stabbing him, and how the chef actually thought it was meant to be a turn on and was actually getting a kick out of it, rather than it just being, Gregory sort of torturing him, and he intended it obviously as a violent act, not something done for pleasure. So that's a really funny scene. But yeah, that's how Jessica in the end tracks down Gregory and Eric. And there's obviously a bit of a fight, and eventually Trish gets involved as well. She's again dressed as the vigilante. And Gregory does escape, but he's obviously left Eric in a really bad way, really beaten up, really psychologically tormented. Will need some time to recoup. So obviously Jessica has him at her apartment to sort of recoup. But Eric is able to give them some information. And Jessica is asking Hogarth at one point what the legal situation would be for Eric to testify, because he's connected to all this in quite a shady sort of way, and he has offences of his own. So, and Hogarth said, with the right lawyer, it could be, he could get a decent amount taken off his sentence sort of thing if he testified against Gregory. But that's kind of how it stays at the moment. It's just Jessica getting that sort of advice from Hogarth. It's still a very shaky sort of thing. And also Costa says, they got the search warrant for Gregory's apartment and didn't find anything. So that's kind of a dead end at this point as well. But I know, I'm going to talk about the next episode in a few moments, but I know that in that, Jessica and Trish decide to go to Gregory's hometown, to try and chase up this lead about his brother. And the other sort of big thing, more with Trish, is the fact that there's a scene with her mother, and her mother, doesn't believe that Trish has superpowers, and so it's this thing where Jessica decides to prove it to her, and she actually throws Trish out a window in front of her mother, and obviously then the mother sees that she has, then she didn't die. Essentially, she floats in the air. So yeah, that's kind of the wake-up call, then yeah, her daughter has superpowers and obviously has this new sort of life and a different direction now. And there's a great line from Trish's mother, who I have to say I'm getting more into as a character. And that then is because, sort of thinks then her and Jessica might be lesbian, and sort of says, there are more interesting lesbians on TV. It's really funny. So there's also the side with Hogarth and the law firm and Malcolm. So Malcolm has decided to take some time out. He's obviously still reeling from the incident with the professor, which is Kif's husband, and obviously him ending up dead or committing suicide as it was, and Malcolm feels responsible for that. And he sort of feels on the outs anyway with Hogarth, but he's still officially on the payroll. But he does decide to take some downtime and some time off. And Zara, his girlfriend, still with the firm, and she's becoming more entrenched sort of thing in Hogarth's circle. And she has a conversation with Malcolm on the phone, and he sort of covers with, then, he's taking holiday and some time off. And I think, Zara suspects something else is going on. But, that's the explanation. And it's a really big episode for Malcolm because, I guess just with the firm, Zara, is getting more involved. And they're sort of putting feelers out there and trying to rebuild their reputation as a firm, because of how things happened with the professor and how their public image was damaged through that. And at one point, Hogarth gives this bullish sort of speak about getting all their clients back or fighting for their clients and their sort of image. And, Zara's becoming a bigger part of that. And at one point they get screwed out of a merger, by this guy who's, sort of underhandedly sort of nicks some of their clients and backs out of a merger. But yes, there's more stuff there. But as I was saying, it is a big episode for Malcolm because he is contacted by Jess and asked to look after Eric's sister. And she is, of course, a prostitute, as we found out in the last episode. Her street name is Candy. And it's funny because Candy is actually played by an actress who's on The Deuce, which, of course, David Simon's HBO show, really high-class drama, which is set around the porn industry, in the sort of 70s and 80s, and she's actually in that as well, and I'm pretty sure she plays a prostitute in that. I think she might play a prostitute who later walks away and is involved in the sort of anti-prostitution movement. I'm pretty sure that's her character. I'm not too sure, but anyway, she's a good actress, and so she plays Eric's sister, who is a prostitute. And in one scene in particular, when Malcolm, goes to get her and pick her up, he's very aggressive. He gets into a fight with like, I think it's her pimp or one of the clients. And we suddenly see this really hyper masculine outburst from Malcolm. He becomes this really aggressive, animalistic sort of character, and he really lays into this guy, really beats him up, and just loses it, just crosses a line, really. It goes beyond, just an exchange or just a one punch sort of thing. And I think it's a really big character beat because, we're seeing the changes he has gone on. Since working with Hogarth, we're seeing now a more ruthless, cold side to Malcolm, a bit more machine-like, and the changes he has gone on. And it's an interesting sort of episode for him in that sense, because later on, when he's in the apartment and he's watching Candy, who at one point does sort of escape because her pimp comes and gets her, and she's obviously like, you know, I've got to make a living sort of thing, so I've got to go back out on the street. But yeah, at one point when they're in the apartment together, she actually starts seducing him, and he tries to resist because he's obviously trying to be this upstanding guy, and he's got a relationship with Zara. And I just thought that was a really interesting scene. I'm not sure if they actually have sex. I think it's maybe just that she's kind of, you know, jerking him off, for want of a better term. And he, in the end, you know, gives into it. But it's an interesting scene because I think on the one hand it's Malcolm struggling with his identity, struggling to not just be a typical, you know, sex grave sort of man sort of thing, and having a bit of dignity, not just because of the relationship with Zara, but I think also because he, you know, he maybe has a morality about, you know, the sort of the prostitution and what have you, and wants better for this girl, and, you know, she's in his care, so doesn't want to take advantage of her, even though, you know, it's her seducing him. And on the other hand, I think there's this thing with her where, yeah, she's maybe trapped in this sort of life where, yeah, this becomes the go-to, you know, where she has to seduce men. She sort of feels like that's her route in life sort of thing, isn't it? That's, yeah, a default position sort of thing, rather than having a bit more to life than that. So it's an interesting scene, interesting episode for Malcolm. And I think that's pretty much the episode. So it's a solid episode. Again, ticking along quite nicely. Some good character stuff. And so I think that, yeah, that brings me on to episode 7, which is aka the double half Wappinger, which is a wrestling sort of phrase or term, and I'll explain it a bit later. So it's sort of revealed because Slashinger is sort of brought in for questioning and what have you. It's revealed then Hogarth is now representing him, and so we see them on the court steps because she obviously gets him out on bail. And in a way, Slashinger goes off script because he turns the focus on the vigilante, and kind of says, you know, people like that are turning this city into something really uneasy. They're sort of giving feminism a bad name in a way. They're sort of resorting to violence and what have you, and obviously he puts the heat on Jessica as well for being an associate with her, and he's essentially once again painting himself as an innocent, and that, yeah, he's been the victim and the city is the victim because of their actions. And he's almost, you know, in some ways you can see it as quite a current sort of topic, where he's kind of this sort of figure who's trying to stir up all this hate sort of mongering, and using the media for his own sort of political ends and for his own advantages. And I think the modern media, 24 hours news and what have you, is a big theme in this season. And sort of after the press have gone, you know, Hogarth is sort of caught off guard by this, and she's kind of like, well, what are you doing? You didn't say you were going to do that. That's not part of your defence sort of thing. You know, I'm going to handle your defence. And And, Gregory sort of tries to justify it. And at one point, there's a sort of a thing where he kind of says to her, you need me more than I need you. And the idea is then Gregory, the case of, representing Schlesinger is a big thing for the law firm to try and rebuild their reputation, and it's quite a coup, and particularly if they can get him off, sort of thing. But it's interesting because Hogarth obviously has this association with Jessica, and obviously, she's interested in representing Gregory as a client, not necessarily demonising Jessica. And Jessica obviously challenges Jerry on it, and she kind of does this lawyer sort of logic where she says, well, he's a client like everyone else. He has a right to a proper defence. And again, it's all very murky because, up to a point what Hogarth says and the justification, there is something to that, but obviously she's in danger of crossing over a line, by well, again, for starters, there's this question of, is absolutely anybody, no matter their actions, entitled to a defence? But even if they are, is this a dangerous area? The way they've gone, and obviously Schlesinger surprised her. But yeah, how much is too much, essentially? But yeah, for the time being, Hogarth is defending Schlesinger. And again, she's getting Zara to dig up some dirt and work with Schlesinger. And there's a very uneasy scene where Schlesinger comes in and they're in a meeting with him, Hogarth, and Zara. And Malcolm actually comes in and sees them in the room together, and he's obviously unhappy about the development there. And yeah, so Malcolm is concerned. He voices his concern after Gregory has left, and Hogarth gives him the same spiel. This is a big case for us. He deserves a defence. But she actually asks Malcolm to sort of look into his background and to try and make sure there's no skeletons. Obviously, he's been very thorough. That's part of his whole thing, trying to leave no trace. And it's part of his image as well. He's kind of done all these things to build up this image so that people wouldn't suspect him. So Malcolm is sent to do that by Hogarth. So that's kind of Hogarth's way of saying, we do need to be careful. I'm aware of how dangerous he is. So yeah, if you do this, that's our way of protecting our sort of our end of things, because if there is something, we can challenge him, or we have the right to terminate him, and yeah, we don't have to stay with him. So Malcolm obviously is happy to do that. But obviously the big plot of the episode, as I said before, is then Jessica and Trish decide to go off to Gregory's hometown to try and chase up facts about the brother and his sort of death. And it's quite a good sort of switch of location, because you have them driving out to this sort of southern town, this very kind of innocent working class sort of location, and everyone there seems to have nothing but good things to say about Gregory. again, the image of this very clean-cut boy, and that's the sense really. Then it's kind of the metaphor about how often the innocent-looking ones, and they project something on the surface, and then there's a darkness sort of lying underneath. But yes, there's a good scene where they go to like the local sort of sheriff's office with the intention of getting the file on the case, on Donnie, the brother was called, and so Trish has to create a diversion because Jessica sort of comes in and she doesn't give away who she is, and tries to get more information, tries to get the file. And obviously the officer on duty isn't willing to give her it. And that's when we start hearing about, the clean cut image, and she doesn't believe, that that boy she knew is a murderer. And another clever little touch about this scene is the fact that Jessica, the officer, actually recognises her from news and from social media and the video. So again, it's like this thing of Jessica. She's left the city, gone to this different place, but she still can't escape, social media and the fact that this thing has been put up online and anyone can see it. And so the videos on social media have kind of painted her in a bad light, and so this officer is more willing to believe, what she knew of Gregory as a boy than Jessica Jones sort of thing, and how she's been painted in the media. So anyway, there's this comical scene really when Trish creates a distraction, and she basically sets off her car alarm, and is acting really melodramatically and sort of saying she can't turn it off, and screaming and everything. So that obviously draws attention to her, and that's the chance Jessica needs to nick the file. And also Malcolm goes to Gillian, obviously at Jessica's office, and Gillian at first is hesitant to give her the phone number because Malcolm's like, where are they? I need to talk to Jessica. And that's where Gillian tells her, and Malcolm calls the cell, but Trish is there in the car. It's when Jessica is in the office, and Trish basically asks Gillian, almost on the behalf of Jessica, because Jessica is not there, but she sort of asks Gillian to sort of show Malcolm the files of the case sort of thing. So that's sort of good enough for Gillian, but Trish also warns Malcolm, you're in a dangerous place working with Hogarth sort of thing. So there's not too much to that scene, but yeah, so they search through the file, Donnie's file, and it's like a tractor sort of incident, and they can't find any signs of any foul play. And we know there's some stuff with Gregory where he sort of says, there was a chat with his father at the funeral and a scene at the end, but yeah, the father still was talking about Donnie like he's the number one sort of thing. But they can't find anything, but they do find one thing, and the one thing they find is then Gregory was in a wrestling class. So this is where the title of the episode comes from. He was in a wrestling class, and one of the other kids in the wrestling class mysteriously disappeared years ago. And it was not long after Gregory said that he was leaving town. There was an odd sort of situation where he came over one day and there was a meet with the wrestling team. And yeah, not long ago, the kid had sort of disappeared. So Jessica goes over to the parents' house, sort of asks them for information. And it's interesting because the mother, again, she's aware of who Jessica is because of the videos and what have you, the media. And she doesn't trust her. She doesn't want to give her information. And Jessica is like, I'm interested because I want to get to the bottom of what happened to your son. But, for obvious reasons, they don't want this stuff dredging back up. And it's actually the father who's a bit more willing to answer questions, and he fills her in a bit on the past and on that day, and about how they supposedly went out to the garden, and the gazebo's out there. And yeah, so there's a gazebo, and Gregory was back there with this friend from the wrestling team. And so Jessica goes back there, and she suspects something about the gazebo because they basically all the wrestlers, including Gregory, planted this gazebo there. They did it on that day, and obviously he disappeared the son. And Jessica uses her obviously superhuman strength, and she goes out there, and obviously they're not happy about her going out there, but she pushes forward anyway, and she uses the superhuman strength, lifts up the gazebo, and lo and behold, there he is, his body, his rotting body, his bones. So all these years, his body has been there, the body of the son. And it's traumatic for the parents. Obviously, it's a terrible thing for them to see. And obviously, Jessica feels bad, but obviously, she has to press on. And this is a new lead, essentially. She can, give this information to Costa and try to get him to, to press this and get a warrant to go. I mean, it's a bit more complicated because, it's in another state, and he would really have to convince his superiors. Then it's in their interest to pursue, this. So yeah. And so the very end of the episode, which I really like, is then Jessica tracks down Gregory at his gym. And as it turns out, again, linking to the wrestling connection, he's actually teaching young kids how to wrestle. And so it's the perfect sort of cover. And Jess, lets him know that she's on to him about his past. And so he kind of teases her and says, why don't we have a wrestle? And it's obviously in front of kids, and so the idea is that he's trying to play on her emotions and trying to get her to sort of act aggressive and beat him up, and again he's going to try and use that to try and film her doing something which makes her look bad, or to just unhinge her. But it's a really good scene because it's this playful sort of sparring back and forth, and on this occasion Jessica sort of calls his bluff and keeps her cool, and eventually does, kind of give him a little slam, and does act a bit aggressive, but she's also in control. She just turns the tables, and it's almost just this little warning to him, this little tap that's saying, yeah, I'm on to you, I'm around, and we will meet again. This is not the end of it. And the kids sort of cheer because they're impressed, and so it works in Jessica's favour. But I do like the way it's just this little mini sort of battle between the two, and it's kind of, it's like a warm up to the big event, which will be the sort of big battle at the end of the season, if you like, or if it turns out to be that, it might not be. But yeah, two really good episodes, I thought, really building the season nicely. And yeah, I did enjoy the stuff with Trish and Jessica in Gregory's hotel, and the nice little ending. So yeah, it's almost the way to mark the midpoint of the season. Sorry. So yeah, that's Jessica Jones episode 6 and 7. So if you have any thoughts on the comments below, then please let me know, like and subscribe if you haven't already. So as you all know, well, regulars to the channel know, I've been getting a bit more consistent with the content, so I just put another Buffy review up today that is of episode 5 of season 1. I've also made a start on the Gilmore Girls, so another retro type review. I've done a couple of reviews of that if you want to check out those reviews if you're a Gilmore Girls fan, or if you've never seen the show and interested in seeing the show, you can check them out. I also put up a movie review, which was the recent release In Fabric, and I'll do more sort of cult films is the idea. And yeah, so lots of stuff. I obviously do streams from time to time. I think I might try and do one this weekend, but yeah, so keep it here, and yeah, make any comments about season 3 of Jessica Jones. But I'll be back with more soon. So thanks for listening. Goodbye.